If you want to build wealth through midterm rentals, that's awesome. But here's the deal. One bad lease can destroy your entire operation. And I'm talking about lawsuits, unpaid rent, tenants who turn into squatters. It's real and it's ugly. And today we're going to be ripping apart what to avoid in your leases, the non-negotiables and the landmines that could wreck your business before you even realize it. So if you want to play in the space, you have to know the game because rules are a bit different and the stakes are higher. So we're going to jump into that today with Harrison, who works over at TurboTenant.
Is this person having major red flags? And that's kind of an easy check mark. Someone that comes up and I've seen, 3 to 4 speeding tickets a year.
Some big red flags for me, Harrison, are inconsistent employment history. I've also had this multiple different times where somebody will put their social security number in, but put a number off. So when we go to do the background check, it comes back as inconsistent. The second I see anything like that, that's a big red flag for me.
Every market is unique and those laws change all the time. As those laws come out, making sure that your lease is updated to take advantage of those protections is really valuable. And if you're writing a lease with ChatGPT, it's not going to have that stuff. It's not going to be updated. The details are really what protects you.
Welcome to the JV Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Vasquez. Harrison, who works over at TurboTenant. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, doing well. Thank you for having me.
What'd you think about that intro, man? Was that pretty good?
Yeah, it was pretty good. You got my name right. That's a good start. I don't want squatters either. So yeah. I'm excited to talk about it.
That's awesome, man. I usually I ask ChatGPT to come up with something cool that has a little mix between Cody Sanchez and Theo Vaughn. It didn't really sound like either of those, but here we are, man. Well, it's awesome to have you on this call today. I'm excited because I think one of the things with leases is that, especially in the midterm rental space, is that so many people are worried, Harrison, about, having squatters stay in their homes. And leases at the end of the day are super, super critical for the potential of going down a rabbit hole of potential bad tenants, court ordinances. In fact, one of the big things with me, Harrison, is that I actually watched my family go through multiple different court evictions as a landlord when I was a kid. That was my introduction to real estate. So I didn't want to get into real estate at all. I know that was detrimental to my family, and I would not encourage that upon anybody. And it wasn't just one time that my family had that, Harrison. It was multiple different times. And it was my parents' fault because they weren't good at business. They probably shouldn't have been landlords, but hey, the American dream is to buy properties, and that's what they did. But we're going to break this down today, Harrison. Let's talk about what's important about a lease. Let's break down what TurboTenant is known for is actually simplifying the leasing process, but what key customization options do you think could help people, specifically landlords in the midterm space, tailor leases for their unique market? Is there anything that you can think of right now?
I mean, the first thing we always start with at TurboTenant is every market is unique, and those laws change all the time. Talking about squatters, a lot of laws are actually starting to benefit landlords more and more. It seems to be conversations like these and the news articles you read, it's on the radar. So as those laws come out, making sure that your lease is updated to take advantage of those protections is really valuable. And that's why we have a legal team that, once it comes out within a week, our lease agreement usually has that new language in. The more that's in there, the better. As things get more and more specific, it's really annoying to read all that stuff, but those 5 extra minutes you spend is going to save you a lot more than 5 minutes on the back end if something goes wrong. So really knowing what your state and even county allows and taking advantage of those protections as a landlord are really beneficial. And then it's spelled out for the tenant too. If you have a really ironclad lease, they know that this place is legit, and there's things that they're going to need to really follow because it's a really well-drawn lease. If you're writing a lease with ChatGPT, it's not going to have that stuff. It's not going to be updated. So I think that's the first part, is just understanding what can go in. We talk about fair housing violations and all that stuff, and we could dive into that if you're interested, but the details are really what protects you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because a lot of the things that we're doing, in fact, when you guys are listening to this episode, everything we're going to talk about, Harrison and I are not attorneys. Harrison works for TurboTenant. I'm a landlord. So we're not attorneys at all, and we're disclosing that right up on the front. I just want to make sure that I say that. But the thing that I'm going to bring up right now is really, really important that we've actually started doing, and my attorney actually advised me to do this, Harrison. And this is for everybody out there that has a midterm rental right now. We stopped using the word tenant and we started using the word guest. And the reason why we did that is because it reinforces the idea that a guest is actually there on a temporary basis. So we actually added these extra addendums that are it reinforces that exact idea. And the way that the verbiage works in leases is super impactful. And again, this is why I want you guys to talk to an attorney. I'm just giving you this as framework right now. I mean, Harrison, maybe we can talk about it, but we really started to decide what the guests that were actually staying with us, they're there on temporary assignment. They're there temporary while they lose their home. Families lose their homes, which we do a lot of housing for those specific type of people. And then we have business travelers and things of that nature. And we really tried to get away from the word tenant, and we're really focusing on guest. Have you heard anything about any addendums like that, or has there been any talk about that with you guys in the space at all?
No, I haven't heard of that. That's a pretty interesting and potentially clever thing. I mean, I'm not an attorney. I'm a marketing guy.
Yeah.
I am a landlord, but those details can go a long way. Of just a small word can make a major difference in your lease, and understanding those can be game changers for landlords and midterm rental owners. That even in some ways potentially make your place more valuable because it's worded in a way that benefits the guest in that sense.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing too, is that a lot of people don't realize when you're putting a lease together, you're actually protecting yourself and you're protecting the guest. I mean, we're trying to get away from the word tenant right now, but we'll use it for this example. But that's what leases are actually there. They're there to protect you as a landlord, and they're there to protect the tenant or the guest or whatever you decide to call it. But I'm glad you brought up the Fair Housing Act because those laws are changing all the time. You're really, that's actually very true. But the thing about using the word guest instead of tenants is it reinforces the idea that there is a temporary arrangement, which may often offer more flexibility and clarity, especially if your property falls under certain housing laws that differentiate between tenants and guests. And I think that's such an important thing. So anybody that's out there that you're just hearing this for the first time, make sure you talk to an attorney, but also make sure to include an addendum that outlines the terminology and distinction between, like, you want to avoid any confusion that comes together at all. And I think that's really an important thing to do. Have you seen anything that's kind of funky in leases before when it comes to landlords with midterm tenants at all, Harrison? Or is that, or you just said this is the first time you're hearing anything like that?
Well, for the guest part, that's interesting. I mean, most of the stuff that we have a lease builder, so you're putting in all the information, and we call out a lot of fair housing violations and warnings and things like that, and give recommendations. That's the stuff that we see the most, is people wanting a specific type of person, and you can't do that. My favorite one is always, you can't say no smokers because it's a person
Yeah.
versus you can say no smoking. That's fine.
Yeah.
Just it's those details. And I think it goes right back to the guest comment of, like, the word choices that you use in your lease are a lot bigger than you think they are. And that's where the attorney part is valuable. If you're really getting serious in multiple properties, those couple $100 of attorney's fees are worth it to even reviewing our leases. If you want to get into that kind of detail for your own unique situation, that investment will pay off one day. That you're going to really thank yourself if you have the right language specifically.
Yeah, thankfully I'm knocking on wood right now. And the reason why I'm knocking on wood is because I haven't actually had to go through any legal action or anything of that nature before with any types of guests or tenants in my properties, which I'm grateful for. But I hear all the time from people that are just like, I got somebody that stayed at my house for a long time, and I didn't vet them the right way. I didn't do these kinds of things. And there's so many red flags, and each landlord has the ability to kind of maneuver in whichever direction they want when it comes to red flags. Like, I personally, Harrison, if somebody has medical bills or student loan debt, but they're paying their car payments on time, they're paying their rent on time for wherever they were at before, I'm actually okay with that. Their credit score might only be 595 or 575 because of the medical bills and the whatever they went to school for. They're still paying these loans, or maybe they're faulty on those. Like, I don't actually look at that as a negative. But every landlord has the ability to kind of move and fluctuate. What do you see as like the common denominator when it comes to what a good credit score is going to be, what the job history needs to look like? Is there any specific set of standards that you see when you're screening tenants, or what you would want to use, or kind of a baseline?
Yeah. So, I mean, for my properties, the background check is always good. Does this person have any major red flags? And that's kind of an easy check mark. Someone that comes up and I've seen, 3 to 4 speeding tickets a year. It was in Miami. It was just the thing, I guess. That's that was kind of a pause situation. Also kind of just, I've had 2 people walk into a place same day to rent it out. One person's asking me every detail about how much electricity costs and things like that. And they're really trying to dial in, is this place affordable? versus the next person walked in, kind of just glanced around and said, I'll take it. I went with the person that was diving into the details, and that person was a great, tenant the whole time. Credit score was average, but just they cared about those things because they've rented places and they're trying to make it work. Versus, am I going to get a 6-month call later that we've had a leak for 3 months and you haven't told me? That first person, I don't think is going to be that person. So that part is important. Looking at their income and, is this place affordable? Is one missed, paycheck going to set them on a spiraling situation? If I can avoid those, I try to.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things that, is this person going to care? And is this person at risk by taking this place? Those are things that I look at.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's some small little things that I look at. Like I can forgive a low credit score based off of those two things that I mentioned before. But like some big red flags for me, Harrison, are inconsistent, like employment history. It's unclear, or there's no actual clear rental history on there. I've also had this multiple different times where somebody will put their social security number in, but like put a number off, or their driver's license information. So if it's like D7298, they would put like A7298. So like when we go to do the background check, it comes back as inconsistent. The second I see anything like that, I just ask like, hey, is there a way to fix this? And they'll usually like not respond right away, or like the response times for me are so important, Harrison. Like if you actually really care about a property that you might potentially be staying at or living at for a certain amount of time, you're going to want to respond quickly. And there's days that pass before somebody will respond back to you. And that's for me, that's like, that just is a clear sign of there's reliability and respect for deadlines that both people, or that party's not willing to facilitate. That's a big red flag for me. You know what I mean?
I think that's a good call out. I mean, you want someone that's going to work with you, because this is a, mutual business arrangement at the end of the day. And, guest or tenant, whatever you want to call them, like it is a business arrangement. I just, as you were saying that, I was thinking of the last time I rented a place and I walked in, we asked all the questions, and then I was like, how can I get this place?
Yeah.
And he's like, you need to do these 3 things. I'm like, okay, I'll get them to you in an hour. I wanted the place. And I wanted to show I'd be a good tenant, and I was. But that set the stage of, I'm going to let this person know if there's problems, and he's going to follow up with me. And it was a great rental. And I ended up showing the place before I left for him, just to get him his next person, because he was a good landlord. And like when you get people like that, I feel like it's always exciting, because your place is in good hands while they're there.
Yeah. And I feel like, man, that poor communication or delayed responses, like you just nailed it right there. If somebody's actually really interested in something, they're going to like make moves right away. They're going to signal any issues of inconsistency or not being reliable by not being able to do something as simple as like engaging and communicating with you. So like I really test people's responsiveness during application process. And if they struggle to communicate effectively, they're probably going to potentially be difficult tenants. I'm not saying they're always going to be that, but there's a good likelihood. And I've done this before and I've learned it the hard way, where I went with I opposed my gut, Harrison, and we ended up having difficult tenants or guests at the time because of that. So here's another question that I have for you. So like I do a lot of leases with corporate entities, corporate companies. I do a lot of corporate housing. So say we have a company, it's a ABC Construction. They're the leasees on the property. Then the guests that are staying, they're just considered guests in the home, but the company's actually covering the mortgage and they're actually on the lease. How would you handle something like that? Or what's your thoughts on, would the lease be different? Would you consider obviously talking to an attorney, but have you ever done anything like that before? Or is there anything that TurboTenant does specifically for folks like that? I'm assuming it'd probably be the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have specifics for how to treat that. And, my mind just, and I haven't done it. I have friends that do, but my first thought of just, you're probably not going to get a great conversation with the person living there beforehand, like we were just trying to talk about.
Yeah.
I certainly would want to background check the individual regardless and just do the check marks of it. I want to make sure that this company is liable. Like they have big insurance policies, way different than the individual. And I'd hate to deal with that, but at least the financial aspect is backed up of like, if this person does trash my place, then I have a really clear line to recoup those costs with the insurance policy that this company has.
Yeah. And not only that, but like you just said something that's crucial is if anybody out there is looking to get corporate clients, which if you're listening to this, you probably are. You're going to want to screen the people that are staying there. You don't just want to take the company's word for it. Like, you actually want to know, especially if you're in a place that has kids nearby, like, you have to know who your guests are going to be. Like, you don't want to have, somebody who's on Megan's Law staying at your property, potentially, if you have neighbors that have kids and things of that nature. So I think it's such an important piece of the puzzle, even if you're working with corporate entities that have millions of dollars, which is why I like to work with these companies, because I know that if they're going to cover the mortgage, or they're going to cover the rent that they say that they're going to pay. Like, I've never had any issues with like that at all. I think subconsciously, Harrison, watching my parents go through the court issues is what pushed me in that direction to work with these companies and entities. So I never had to deal with that. Because again, these are like multi-million-dollar companies. They're using employees as leverage. The people that are staying at the property are actually making money so that they can cover these bills. And usually they're multi-million-dollar companies that we're working with. But yeah, really important there. A red flag for me on that specific issue would be a company that says, no, you can't screen or background check our employees. We're not going to give you their information. Like, that alone right there would be like, I'm not going to do this. Like, I'm not going to have these folks stay at the place. But that also goes to, like, this is where you need to be smart. Like, what if one of those guests that's staying at the property has negative rental history? How are you going to adapt to that? And I think that's where you have to have this level of, understanding of what you're actually doing. You're working with a corporate entity and you're saying this company is going to be covering it. And you might have 2 or 3 people out of 5 that are staying in the property. Maybe 2 of those don't have good rental history. Does that weed them out ultimately right away? I think those are things that people have to think about. If you're going into this game and you're going to be working with companies like that, you have to get the backing, like you mentioned a minute ago. There has to be something in an addendum that states that these folks are staying, they don't actually meet the criteria, and that company ABC is going to be covering any losses, any issues that are potentially to arise based off the fact that, A, B, and C. You know what I mean? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the more you can protect yourself early on and spell it out, the better. It's talking about guests, like when you go to a hotel, they take a credit card just in case. And they make sure it works too. If we're talking about, midterm rentals, and this company can't back up the confidence that you need to rent to them, then that's a major red flag. And you said it, and I'll say it as well, of like those 30 minutes to first hour of conversation you have with these people are probably the track record you're going to experience during the time that you work with them. Like, people don't drastically change very often, and it definitely does happen, but this isn't a small investment that you guys have. These are things that you can be picky about, because it's going to cost you in the long run if you make a mistake. Even if you win in court, you still lose. You might get the money back, but the time is brutal and the stress. And that's not why we got into real estate investing, is to spend time in court. It's to create great experiences so that you can make money and build wealth. And courts are the worst way to do that.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, when I grew up as a kid, that actually was the first time I've ever watched my parents argue, and it was on our way to I was probably like 8 years old, and we were on our way to the courthouse. I didn't know that's where we were going, but my parents were in an argument. I was sitting in the back of this, like, have you ever watched National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation? You ever watched that?
Yeah, it's been a little while.
Yeah. That car that they have that has like fake wood panels on it?
Okay, yeah, the station wagon.
Yeah. So that was my parents had that car in the 80s, and that's when I was a kid.
The seat flip around in the back?
Yeah, I was like sitting in the back, and I remember like looking out the window. My parents were arguing, and we had this like velvet kind of, the car was velvet, and I was like running my hand across it. And I remember looking out the window, I was like, where the hell are we going? And you're right, I was facing backwards. I didn't know where we were going. Like, you have loss of direction, but we ended up at a courthouse, and I was sitting in the very back of the court. And my parents were sitting up front, right? I just want everybody to picture this right now, like a kid that's 9 sitting in the back of a court. My parents said, sit right here. Like, we're going to go up front and talk. And they go up front, and the people that were staying at the house, and they didn't pay rent for 4 months. My dad gave them like the option to not pay for 2 months, and then he would cover the rest. And they ultimately didn't pay. But I remember sitting there, and the judge looked at my parents and was like, Mr. and Mrs. Vasquez, this isn't the first time this person has been in this courtroom for this exact same scenario. Like, what they would do is go in, use their kids, and say, like, because I grew up a super Catholic, so my family was super family oriented and wanted to make sure that there's hardships and how to push people through those, and everybody's going to run into them. So they gave them leniency on those, but those people then took advantage of them. And my mom used to always say, like, you give somebody your hand, they'll take your leg. That's what I saw with real estate. So it was just such an ugly thing. And it was a really negative effect, not only just like you mentioned earlier, the stress that comes along with it, but families absorb that stress. And it's hard to cover bills when you're having to pay for somebody else staying in one of your properties. And it's an awful thing. So yeah, we want to avoid anything like that at all.
And I mean, I think for the listeners, like, this is something that happened to you a long time ago, and you're remembering the feel of the seats of the car. Like, this is something ingrained that is now who you are, and like, you don't want to do that. I mean, you've learned from it and you've become successful, but like, these are the things that you really remember with these kind of stuff. Like, the really bad experiences can weigh on you, and every time that you can invest up front to make sure that you're protecting yourself, it's always a good decision.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Hey everyone, if you are feeling stuck or not like you're making the progress you want in your midterm rental journey, I've got something that can change everything for you. Imagine being part of a community that's not only supportive, but filled with like-minded individuals who are driven to succeed, just like you. Whether you are just starting out, looking to take care of your business to another level, my community is designed to help you break through those barriers. We're currently opening up registration for new enrollees, so if you're serious about building a thriving midterm rental business and you want to leverage my 10,000 hours of experience, this is your chance. Don't miss out on the opportunity to learn, grow, and connect with others in the same path. I hope to see you guys. The link is in the show notes, and let's build something incredible together. Let's get back to this episode. So let's actually dive into this tenant screening portion of it. I know we're talking about the red flags and all that kind of stuff, but are there features that TurboTenant has that landlords can actually dig deeper? And like, what background are you guys doing when we're screening these kinds of things? Is it just a general background check? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, so for our free members, you can have the tenant pay for the standard background check. It's through TransUnion. They go through, a lot of the typical things you'd expect in a background check. Now, for premium members, you can also get a more detailed one that goes more into some of their credit history and some other lists that we run through. And it's actually something that we want to invest more in. Our product team is working on expanding our offering through multiple platforms, not just one, so that landlords just have more tools and investors have more tools. If you want to run 15 background checks, we can hopefully get you to that one stage of, those extra dollars could be worth it one day. We're not there yet, but that's an entire team's focus this quarter is to expand to Equifax specifically. And we're even looking into some other third parties to just do more, because it's a low cost, but it's a really expensive back-end cost if it doesn't work well. And that's why it's just so important for our investors to have these tools.
Got it. I love that. I want to jump into payment automation because this is something I really, really like. I think handling payments on time is critical, especially for people that have mortgages, obviously, they're working with. What payment automation features does TurboTenant provide to ensure landlords receive their money on time every month? And what should they avoid when setting up reoccurring payments?
This one really ties into the topic well because there's details that go a long way. So first, we offer automatic payments. They can pay through credit card, debit card, or ACH. And that is actually a big part, because if a tenant might be, cutting it close, the credit card gets used often from that perspective. It's not, usually you see 5 months in a row of automatic payments and then one credit card payment and then, 6 more months after that. And that credit card bridged the gap. And we helped cover that payment with the credit card payment. But ACH, automatic payments, is the bread and butter and what every landlord should want. It comes right out of the bank account, and it just happens every time on the same day of the month. Mm-hmm. And 98% of those people, 97% of people are paying on time with automatic payments. And it's the full payment. And we were talking about this earlier. Where really savvy people that are trying to skirt the line that you might end up hopefully never working with is, if you pay $1, you're off the hook for eviction for another month out of whatever amount the rent can be. And that's how some people can take advantage, is they will send you a Venmo payment for $1 and that gets them off the hook for eviction. We don't allow that. You have to pay the whole thing. And then we actually add on daily late fees if you choose to take advantage of that. Is one day gets expensive, 2 days, 3, it just compounds. And we also have caps. Not everyone wants to charge forever. and you can't pay new payments without paying the old ones. So
Yeah.
we've really dug into this for the problem that we're talking about today of, people can take advantage of Zelle and Venmo and cash and check. We have a digital track record of every payment, and they're always paid in full because we don't allow anything otherwise.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Stripe and those things because, or even Venmo. I always found these to be, I don't know why people take them because I could pay you today, Harrison, through Venmo, and then I can dispute something 40 days from now. And I will actually get my money back based off of whatever it is. So like, there's not actually any there's not any legal binding stuff that situates those kinds of payments. Can you talk about that for a minute? Which is why you like ACH, and I do too.
Yeah. I mean, I like getting around on time. That's the most important thing. But,
Yeah.
what you said is, I mean, they're not meant for it. And they'll even say, Venmo is a transaction between friends, unless you want to pay for the business account, which then you're paying more fees than you could elsewhere. And, Venmo is protecting Venmo from that perspective. And it's not meant for what we're using it for, which is rent payments. So they're just, it's a great tool for my babysitter, but,
Yeah.
like I actually love that from that aspect, but that's a one-time transaction and we're not going to dispute that.
Right.
Versus why take the risk and deal with that? I've run into that with payments for other things with, PayPal, for example, of the dispute process is just not meant for it versus if you dispute with us, we're treating it like a transaction that it's meant for, and we're looking into it. And we work with landlords from that perspective.
Yeah.
And there's always a track record in communications, especially if they're happening on our platform. We have all the communications in one place. So you have a lot more say and weight in that dispute. And, we try and do what's right. And usually that's for the landlord, but sometimes it isn't. And we want to do what's right from that perspective too.
Yeah, I hear people all the time. They're like, "Yeah, I'm using Venmo for rent payments." I'm just like shaking my head, like, "But hopefully you never run into an issue because I've just watched. I get DMs from people probably once a week where they're like, "Man, I took Venmo or PayPal for rent, and now I have a tenant that's in my property, and they've been there for 3 months, and this is disputed back from the first month they came through, and now that rent is being delayed, and they're saying that it was their dad's account, and like just all these crazy things, these scenarios." But again, there's like professional people that literally do. This is what they do. Again, this is why I was bringing up my childhood trauma because it was specifically around that deal there, and it really made me like be disgusted with real estate and tenants in general. Which I think is, again, it's like not everybody's like that. And I think this is the whole point behind this discussion right now is that these are the tools that you want to make sure that you're utilizing so that you don't run into those issues and the red flags that you want to stay away from. So super, super important. Real quick, you guys allow addendums in your, so I can go into a new tab and write an addendum on a TurboTenant, which is awesome. So you have the standard lease, which I'm going to break into the legal compliance right now. Landlord laws, they vary widely depending on states. And some like California and New York are super, super tough. I'm in California and it's a freaking nightmare. How does TurboTenant help landlords stay compliant in these different states and regulations, particularly when it comes to midterm rentals?
Yeah. So two things. One, I already mentioned, we have someone that does this all day. We have a legal team that they're looking at
In-house.
They're in-house. Yeah. They're based in Colorado, but they are an expert in every single state. And some counties specifically are brutal. And so we're updating that on a regular basis. And if you're going to build a new lease with us, you can't build a bad one. Like it just doesn't allow you. And if you start to type something, we have AI that says that is illegal or that is a warning. You should try and say that. And it's guidance based. We have attorneys, but it's not, it should be good 99% of the time from that perspective. And if you want to go off script, that's when you should probably get some extra advice. And then we also have an AI lease audit tool. You can go in and throw your current lease in there for free. And we'll point out potential risks there. And at the end, it says, hey, can we help you write one? But if not, you get some information for free and encourage people to check it out. And then we do have the ability to have addendums in the lease agreement. And then we also just have a strictly lease addendum as a separate agreement. And all of those can be e-signed, which create that digital track record of this person signed it from this location, which could be pretty valuable if you run into those awful experiences that we've been talking about. This was actually that person's signature from their device. Could be really useful one day. And if you communicate with them through the platform, those timestamps and locations are really valuable too.
That's awesome. I love that, man. Security deposits and damage clauses. This is another one that's really important, especially in the midterm side. What's your recommendations for handling security deposits for midterm rentals, and how does TurboTenant assist with managing deposit disputes or damage claims, especially for longer stays?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't have a ton of experience in security deposits for midterm, so I can say from, annual agreements, I always just charge 1 month of rent. I've been in places that asked for two because of where we were and just
Mm-hmm.
higher risk as a renter. But, clearly stating, what it's for, and also people understanding when they should get it back. Someone moved out, when do I get my deposit? Well, I have 30 days, and I kind of want to look into seeing, are there damages that are not wear and tear? Also, understanding what wear and tear is depends on each
Yeah.
state. So that information is pretty valuable. And we kind of like to try and encourage people to set those expectations. The other thing is the place the same? We have a condition report walkthrough tool where you can go room by room, fan by fan, and
Yeah.
say, like, picture, this is what it looked like when they moved in. Picture, this is what it looked like when they moved out. And it's like, if they don't look the same, it's visual evidence that is documented really well. My first walkthrough was, is the place okay? And then we
Mm-hmm.
both signed. My second one was each room okay? And I luckily didn't have problems, but my last one was pretty detailed.
Yeah. And you guys have that in TurboTenant. It's like a document that you can go through and check mark all these things off in the app.
Yeah, exactly. And it's we pre-fill. If you say you have a 3 bedroom, 2 bath place, we're expecting you to talk about each bedroom, each bathroom, and there's a kitchen and a laundry room, and like, we expect those things. And if you don't have them, you can just say we don't have a laundry room. But we're pre-filling a lot of the rooms and what we expect in them, just to save you time. No one wants to say, like, every light switch works, stuff like that.
Yeah. Got you. Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about renewals and extensions, because this happens all the time with midterm rentals. And this is a really cool feature that I like that you guys have. And I'm curious to take your take on it. So midterm rentals often, the best operators often require more flexibility on lease terms. So I might have a client that has a 3-month term, but then they decide to extend. Does TurboTenant have features to make it easier to extend or renew leases without starting from scratch?
Yeah, I mean, we just piggyback off the original lease. So if it's stored in our platform, we can recreate it or just sign an addendum off of it. And it's all there, no starting from scratch. And then also, just, it's stored in everyone's platform, both sides, so they can see it. My last tenant had 4 extensions, which was
Yeah.
nice. But we did change things over the years. I wasn't using TurboTenant at the time, and now I'm looking through my emails and, like, was this the right one that we changed it? The document storage is an underrated feature that the longer you do it, the more you appreciate. So that's really valuable. And whether you're using us or something else, just making sure it's really organized goes a long way. I'm head of marketing here, but I had a class in college of, I have to name all my files and folders in a certain way on the computer. That has saved me so many times in my career.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing with leases, dating them, just the name of the file. I highly recommend that stuff. And the more you keep things consistent in the same place, the easier it is to extend. And what those expectations are for extending is also helpful if you set them early.
Yeah, I had in my notes here to talk about red flags and rental applications. We kind of talked about those already, like what we should watch out for. Is there anything else that you could think of other than what we mentioned before that would be like a big red flag? And I think this is where, communication for me is important. There's the obvious things: a credit score above 620, paying rent on time. Any other red flags you can think of that you can say, like, hey, you guys might want to pay attention to something like this?
Yeah, I mean, my first thing we kind of talked about too is just, like, did they half-ass the application? Were
Yeah.
things missing? Rental experience good. Like, no, I've rented 3 places. I always play on time. Like, that's a good comment versus, oh, it's good.
What about frequent moves? What about people that move a lot, like frequent moves, like every 3 months you see these people moving out, going to another place?
Yeah,
Unstable employment or income, like if they're not covering 3 times the rent, things like that, right?
yeah. I mean, volatility. I think context is important. If someone is a traveling nurse or military, like, of course you expect it then. But yeah, if they have a track record of, missed payments, or they probably can't afford or barely can afford, like, those are things that give you pause. And if you're pausing long enough, I think it's probably a no.
Yeah.
So I think, you said as well, go with your gut. Things don't feel right. They aren't.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Experience goes a long way, but if you're listening to this is why you're here, for our experience, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the other red flags that I pick up, man, is when I have somebody that's like, "Oh, I want to move in tomorrow." Today's the 3rd. We're filming this on October 3rd. They're like, "I need to be in there by on the 4th. In fact, I'm willing to give you 2 months rent up front, cash." Red flag. Nope, not going to happen.
Yeah.
Or people that refuse to do background checks or credit checks. Like, why is somebody refusing something? They're obviously hiding something, and you want to make sure that those things are brought up. And again, frequent moves I think are important. History of property damage or misconduct, like those are really important things to think about.
When I lived in Miami Beach, multiple landlords were asking for 6 months rent up front.
That's crazy.
Which was, you might as well start looking into putting a down payment on a place. And we ended up not doing that. And then in the building, there were a lot of people that stopped paying after 6 months.
Yeah, of course.
This whole influx of these places getting, eviction notices, and, it's really complicated with HOAs and these high rises. And, I'm sure a lot of them worked out, but there was a lot of people they were moving in, they're putting the money down, and they're just not expecting to pay anything afterwards. And it sounds too good to be true. I'm going to get all this money up front. Why?
Yeah.
Like if you have a good tenant, they should be able to pay rent every month. And that shouldn't be a big deal. And if someone's not willing to pay, you do a background check, I wouldn't work with them.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's really, really important to make sure you pay attention to that. And one of the other things too is like if you're walking through with somebody and they're giving you bad vibes or they're like acting funny go with your gut. I can't tell you, like sometimes, especially in the midterm rental space, like we will have, myself included, it'll be 3 weeks in. My mortgage was paid 3 weeks ago, Harrison. And I'm just like, I need a tenant. Like this tenant needs, it doesn't matter. Like I'll start to deviate from my own outline of what I actually will take in as a client. I might avoid 3 weeks in because I paid my mortgage, or a month in or a month and a half. And I'm like, I'm going to now bring somebody in that doesn't make 3 times the rent. And I'm telling you that when you start to deviate from your own standard, like that's when things start to happen. So I would encourage everybody listening to this now, like have a standard of exactly what you're going to do, the type of client that you're looking for, what check marks, they need to have in order for them to be a tenant in your property. And again, like there's social cues you'll get from certain people. And I think it's so important to make sure to pay attention to those. It's one thing to run a business. It's another thing to have kind of that discretion of your own, like people's ability to communicate. And I think those are such powerful things, sometimes even bigger than the financial stability that they may have. Like there may be something off that you might not see, or that you might see, and it is counter intuitive from what you're seeing on paper. So I think it's really important to do that. I've myself been in that situation before. And then real quick, I want to go back to addendums, because I know we're getting ready to end this conversation, but I really want to make sure that people understand this. When you're booking a midterm rental, furnishing and appliance use, there should be a huge addendum specifically on like where the property's furnished, what specifics did the guest responsible for, like if they're needing to, if it's not including all furniture and appliances, there needs to be something that check marks that. Guest responsibility for reporting any damage immediately. You just mentioned that a minute ago, Harrison. I have had guests that haven't reported water leak under the faucet. Then all of a sudden we come in, 6 months later, and we have to replace the hole underneath of the where the water leaked underneath the fridge, and just stuff like that. Penalties for damages beyond normal wear and tear. You got to make sure you put an addendum together that does that. Cleaning and maintenance, you need to make sure you have something for that as well, because again, you're having guests that are staying in the property, and it's their responsibility to make sure that they're taking care of cleaning the place regularly. Mid-stay inspections, make sure that you put in your addendum that, hey, we give you a 48-hour notice that we can come in anytime. In fact, we will do this once a month for the duration of your stay. We're going to give you a 48-hour notice where we're going to show up. Show up. Send your cleaner in there. Make sure you're doing all those things. And then utilities and services, this is another addendum that we have on ours, Harrison, where it's super common for midterm rentals to include utilities, and for preventing guests from abusing having utilities, like keeping the AC on at 65, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 months, you're going to have a massive bill. So you got to make sure you put caps on those. Even there's internet usage stuff that I didn't realize that there was actually caps on internet speed until I had a property that I had these, I'm going to call them a bunch of nerds. They were software engineers, and they were staying at one of our properties, and they just used up the internet, and I ended up getting a massive bill. I didn't know that there was caps on internet. Like I had no idea there was usage details on there. But I ended up finding out. But you need to have clear language that specifically talks about all these things. I'm talking about garbage cans, lawn care, repairs, clear language that handles all that stuff. Because keep in mind, these folks are living on these properties for 3 months, 6 months, whatever that duration is. You have to be super thoughtful on even pets, like pet addendums. What pets are you going to allow? What's that deposit look like? The biggest thing, Harrison, is early termination and exit clauses. What are those things going to be? How are you going to clearly define what those are? Traveling professionals have their contracts end all the freaking time. What's going to happen if that happens? And if you're in the game long enough, it's going to happen to you. What's the penalty? What items are going to be refunded? What are you going to give them back their deposit? So I think it's so important to make sure you're thinking about those things ahead of time. What's your thoughts on that, Harrison?
Yeah, I mean, the more detail you can have in any contract, just in general, the better. And if someone feels like there's too much detail in your agreement, that's a red flag. I would love to see every single piece of furniture and who it's there. And if it isn't there, then I have it in the document, like there's supposed to be this couch as a tenant. Those are the more detailed you get, the better. And I think it creates a really clear communication process with your guests or your tenants from the start. It sets the expectation of, we're being really detailed and thoughtful for a reason. And if you're going to deviate, it's going to cause problems, and you should have that expectation versus if things are really light, then it's a free for all. And that's the expectation you're setting in that agreement. And going back to something you said earlier, just want to say also, like, from running a business, you should also expect challenges. You should expect that you might not have a tenant in every single day or every single month. And if your business can't support that, and you should prepare for that. And that keeps you from getting into those desperate situations of, I'm looking at the annual game, not midterm. It's like that first year, I might have 3 months of vacancy. Mm-hmm. And can this support that over more than a year's period? Like, I might lose year one if I'm thinking of the 5-year game, but I'm consciously making that decision. I'm not going to buy that property if I can't support that decision, because I don't want to take the wrong tenant and get into the wrong situation.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. I'm such a big fan of TurboTenant, what you guys are doing over there. I think it's really cool. I've been a big advocate of TurboTenant for some time, and now I got connected to you guys. I'm actually, I don't know, what's even the right term that I have for my connection with you guys? I don't even know.
I like to call it a partnership.
There you go.
We want everyone to succeed. You succeed, your listeners succeed, and we certainly want to succeed too. And I think when everyone's succeeding, that's a good partnership. It's not just you plug in us because we're paying you, or it's because you want to use us, and we're trying to provide tools that help you become successful. And hopefully this conversation helps people that are listening too. Like, that's the whole point of it all, is when we all win, it's good for everybody, including the people that we provide support to in our living situations, those tenants and guests in your properties.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. Remember, wealth isn't real estate. It's not just about owning properties. It's about protecting them, and your lease is your first line of defense. So make sure it's bulletproof. If you found any of this helpful at all, hit the subscribe button, because we're just like Harrison said, we're just out here getting started, helping you build a smarter, safer rental business. And leases are the foundation of that whole thing. So Harrison, I appreciate you for being here, man. You just spent the last 45 minutes with us, and I hope the audience found some value. I sure as heck did. And I love what you guys are doing over at TurboTenant. Appreciate you so much, man. Thanks for hanging out with us.
No, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you guys as well.
Thank you for listening to the JV podcast. I'm Jesse Vasquez, your host. I appreciate you for listening. And if you could do me a huge solid, go like and subscribe to this. This helps us tremendously. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful rest of your day.